Hello there, lovely people. It's Alex from Nintendo Life here. And yes, it is official. The Switch is now old enough to be called 6 years old. Honestly, I find it a bit crackers that it's that old, but as is a yearly tradition, we're going to go through and look at what we consider to be the best Switch games over the past year. So, you know, not all time. There's going to be no Breath of the Wild. Yes, I've got a list of what we consider to be the 21 best Switch games released over the past 525,600 minutes, and because it's just terrible trying to order things, we're going to randomize it to make it more fun and more fair, and I'm going to do it now. And there's the list. We're starting off with a banger. But anyway, that's more than enough waffling. Let's dive right into things. Starting things off, we have the frankly phenomenal Splatoon 3. I adored Splatoon 2 and I loved the original Splatoon as well, but this does kind of just take everything to the next level. It's the same running, gunning, inking, shooting, crazy idea that Nintendo had back in 2015. Well, actually they probably had it earlier, but that's when it released. Refined more and further than ever before, and they're still bringing new stuff in. And okay, the Super Chumps may not be all that, but you know, at least the Kraken's fun. It does everything an online shooter does. It's not some sort of weird, horrible sort of grotesque menu system with God knows how many microtransactions in it. It is just a good, honest online multiplayer shooter with fun mechanics, great style, fantastic performance, and salmon run. It's just an absolute dream. Next up, we have No Man's Sky. Now, this is a game that arguably, you should probably choose to play on another platform just due to the pure performance, but if all you've got is a Switch, it's the full thing right here, minus multiplayer. Despite that, this is still the 18 quintillion planet simulator that it is on other platforms. It's the full fat experience, and you can play this pretty much forever. You'll be flying around, taking out enemies in space, and you'll be landing and looking at the local flora and fauna and desperately trying to run away from sentinels as they try and take you down. You'll be base building. You'll be mining. It's the sort of thing where it's everything that's lovely about modern games and modern ideology when it comes to things like crafting and base building and stuff like that. And again, it runs on Switch surprisingly well. In truth, you won't have as smooth an experience as you would on other platforms, but as I said before, my god, you've got to give this some consideration. Next up, we've got Octopath Traveler 2. Funnily enough, this is the sequel to the original Octopath Traveler. And what a sequel. If you're a sucker for a classic RPG, but with modern stylings, but maybe not all the modern stylings, as you can probably tell from the footage, then this is going to be right up your alley. Just as a good sequel should, it takes everything that made the original so fantastic, and it just dials everything up and makes it an absolutely joyful experience. I can't say I'm honestly a fan of the HD 2D visuals, but I'm well aware that I'm in the minority there, and it should not get in the way of what is one of the best RPGs available on Switch, and considering how many RPGs there are available on Switch, that's saying something. Next up, it's another kind of throwback Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. I honestly didn't think that you would be able to release a side-scrolling beat-em-up game with this retro styling and have it be not only this successful, but this good. It is just everything that you would expect a modern side-scrolling beat-em-up to be. The combat is developed and deep and rich without being completely overwhelming, just what you want from something, simple and side-scrolly. It's fluid, it runs flawlessly, it sounds amazing, and it utilizes the cast to the absolute best of their abilities. There is a degree of repetitiveness about it, but that's more just kind of part and parcel for the genre, and I don't really know how they'd be able to kind of get around that, but if you like beat-em-ups, you're probably into that sort of thing anyway, so, I mean, if you like beat-em-ups, then you've probably already got this. Let's not beat around the bush. Signing up next, it's 2 Point Campus. Now, I'm a huge fan of 2 Point Hospital and management sims overall, and 2 Point Campus, it doesn't do exactly the same thing. On the surface, it looks like, hey, it's 2 Point Hospital, but with a university skin, but it's not. Management sims largely revolve around making money and expanding and, in order to make more money. It's all about making money, whereas this, it more kind of leans towards the side of taking care of your students. Like, you genuinely have to make sure that they're doing well and having a good time, and that's how you will benefit. You know, you can't just pump a load of money in and, you know, sort of be a capitalist society university. I mean, you probably could do that, but it's not the, like, ideal way to do things. It's bursting with charm. It's genuinely, like, really, really funny most of the time. Not all the time, that would be a bit grating, but you'll always get someone coming on the radio and they're going to be talking about cheesy gubbins or something, and I just adore it. I just absolutely adore it. Bleeping and blooping its way into the list is Atari 50. Now, this is a bit of a complicated one. It definitely deserves to be on this list, but it does come with a few caveats. This is not 50 Atari games. This is the 50th anniversary kind of thing. That's where the 50 comes from. The actual number of games is like over 100, and you will get variations on certain games, like Centipede and Millipede, but whichever way you slice it, it's 100 games. It's 100 games! This has easily become the gold standard for this kind of sort of anniversary collection of really old systems, because it just does everything absolutely right. Now, I know it doesn't sound like a big thing to say, but the emulation is perfect. I know things are, all these games are super old, but even so, you know, just because you've got a really powerful machine doesn't mean the emulation's going to be perfect. You've got so many quirks and even flaws to take into consideration to make sure that you're getting the original experience, and it absolutely nails it. There are some obvious omissions due to things like licensing, we're sure, like there's no burger time, which I'm not going to get over. And if you didn't really grow up around this style of game, it's going to be a lot harder to get something of value out of it. But if you have a passing interest, this is easily the best way to play these Atari classics on a modern system. Screaming their way onto the list, we have Persona 5 Royal. Now, I don't know what I can say about this game that hasn't already been said, but I'll try. It's 50% excellent life sim, 50% excellent RPG, and it's all wrapped up in, frankly, the most stylish menus and graphical user interface that I've ever bloomin' seen. This game's been around for ages. It's been released on every platform under the sun, well, within reason, and yet it is still worth talking about when it comes out because it is that good. Persona 4 is absolutely worth mentioning as well, but we can't deny that Persona 5 absolutely takes the crown here. It deals with some really quite serious topics, and frankly, I'm not against that. This is a game for adults, and I don't think that things like that, provided that they are presented in the way that they are in Persona 5, I don't think those should be off the table. These themes should be explored, but obviously with the greatest of care. And Persona 5 does it superbly. Also, it's got a funny talking cat that denies they're a cat, so you know it's good. Coming out of blinking nowhere, we have Live Alive. This is a remake of a classic 28-year-old game, or it might even be 29 by now, because it came out in the previous year. And even though, yes, it's using the same HD 2D visuals that I am on the record as saying that I'm not a particular fan of, I think it kind of works a little bit better here. I really couldn't tell you why. But regardless of that, it's a fantastic RPG. There's a lot of RPGs. Frankly, it's the sort of game where you wouldn't even necessarily know it was a remake unless you knew it was a remake, because it absolutely stands up today. And obviously there have been some nips and tucks, but the general sort of overall experience is the same as it was back in the 90s. Which means that this was ludicrously ahead of its time. It absolutely deserves a place on Switch, and it absolutely deserves a place on this list. It is simply a joy from start to finish, and although there are some signs to the keen-eyed among you that it is an older game, I think that just kind of adds to its charm a little bit. Smashing in with another controversial art style, it's Return to Monkey Island. A lot of people didn't get the art style at first, and I was one of them, but I've kind of warmed to it. I couldn't exactly tell you why, but yeah, I actually kind of like it now, and it helps that it's also a bloomin' good game underneath. It's a classic point-and-click adventure game dragged kicking and screaming into the 21st century. And I've got to be honest, I'm on a bit of a, retro PC gaming kick at the moment, like all the MS-DOS games and stuff like that, and this is absolutely falling in line with that, but it has all the lovely modern things like good controls. It may not be for everyone, but if you have even a sort of a passing interest, or maybe you grew up with those educational point-and-click adventure games, I guarantee you're gonna have an absolute blast with this one. It's a return to Monkey Island in full force, and I couldn't be happier. Sauntering onto the list, we have Bayonetta 3. Now, I'm a big Platinum Games fan, and Bayonetta 3, I was a little bit in two minds when it was, I'd say first revealed, not when it was first revealed, but when they actually showed some gameplay, you know, like 7 years later. I was somewhat in two minds about it, but I shouldn't have been. It's an absolute blast from start to finish. They have gone so hard with every single aspect of this game. It is almost overwhelming at times at how many different ideas they're implementing, but at the same time, it just kind of works. It is an absolute onslaught on the senses, and I mean that in the best possible way. All the levels are bigger, more expansive. The amount of style that's going on is, as they say, slightly overwhelming at times, but you just can't help but get lost in it and enjoy every second. I think the easiest way to describe this game is that it is a trip, but it is a trip you're going to want to go on time and time and time again. Well, it's just over halfway through, and we want to give a little shout out to some, what I'm going to be calling honorable unmentionables. Unmentionable because they're technically not games, but DLC, but we felt the need to mention them anyway. So are they unmentionable? Let's move on. Yes, we'd be remiss if we didn't at least acknowledge the fact that we have had some cracking DLC this time around. And the two stars of the show for us are The Delicious Last Course with Cuphead and Monster Hunter Rise's Sunbreak. Both of these take what was previously an incredibly solid foundation of a game, and they just boost it up. They just boost it up in a way that well, maybe you could predict it, but at the same time, you're still going to be bloomin' pleased when you play it. Both of them absolutely make the game harder, and that's going to potentially put some people off, but if you've already played through these games, then you absolutely should consider getting these DLC packs, because but if you've played through the games already, then you will have the skills in order to enjoy these delicious last courses. That was funnier in my head. Genuinely fantastic DLC. Broke my heart not to include it in the list, but they're not games, they're DLC. We want to keep things simple. Let's get back to simplicity. Dancing its way onto the list, we have Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe. Like a very late addition, I suppose, to the list. If you enjoy that classic Kirby formula, then you absolutely have to get this game. I mean, it is one of the best Kirby games ever, re-released with better graphics, more stuff, like a lot more stuff. You can play with 3 other people if you want to. The game starts off easy, and then when you complete it, that's when it starts to get really hard, just as every Kirby game should. It's not breaking any new ground, but the ground it is treading is oh so familiar and oh so delicious. If you like Kirby games, then this is easily a no-brainer. Next up, we've got, it's another HD 2D game. Yes, triangle strategy. If the previous RPGs aren't your kind of thing and you prefer more of a turn-based sort of grid-based thing, a little bit to Final Fantasy Tactics, then this is right up your alley. The combat is hugely deep and satisfying, just what tactical turn-based RPG fans kind of love, as well as having a fantastic cast of characters and really quite a lot of agency for the player. But the thing that really stands out, and I'm surprised to say this, is the world building. Now, this is something that is so easy to get wrong, but it absolutely nails it. You genuinely feel that this is a real, living, breathing world with real politics and real strife and struggle. It doesn't just feel like you're playing a game, it feels like you're playing a game in a real world. It's just a little bit impressive. It does have the occasional bit of slightly dodgy voice acting and dialogue here and there, and that could probably be argued with Live Alive and Octopath Traveler 2 as well, but even then, it's not enough to spoil the experience. And if this is your kind of game, well, you've probably already got it, baby. Next up, it's the port that frankly shouldn't run as well as it does. Yes, it's NieR Automata, or Automata, or Automato. This is a modern classic in every sense of the word. It's Platinum Games at it again, and we've just talked about world building. This takes it even further, I'd say. There's something so calm, yet eerie, yet pleasing about going around this post-apocalyptic world, where realistically, robots are the new... what are we? Humans? Oh. The gameplay is varied, the story is absolutely to die for, and yeah, as I stated at the beginning of this entry, the port is just fantastic. It runs surprisingly well on Switch. I mean, the only thing really holding it back is some design decisions, but that's not the porting job. and it's still absolutely worth your time. You should buy it. Good gravy, RPG fans have eaten well the past year. Yes, it is Chained Echoes up next. Arguably taking a similar sort of nostalgic approach to something like Octopath Traveler 2, Chained Echoes takes all of those lovely 90s RPG tropes, but it puts its own spin on them. It's definitely not going for the same thing as Octopath Traveler, even though the source inspiration is arguably the same. One of the things that I appreciate most about this game is that it manages to push you in the right direction, but without pushing you, it just kind of sort of encourages you, but you still feel like you're making decisions. But really, the game is just very cleverly kind of trying to make you make the right decisions. It does it super well, and it makes it feel like the entire narrative and the entire game is evolving very naturally, but realistically, you're going down the path the developers intended you to take. It's very clever. There's absolutely masses to do, and even though the story gets a little bit dry in places, it still manages to have one of the most wonderful examples of character growth that I've seen in a very, very long time. That's something that I feel gets overlooked a lot in stories these days, so I'm super pleased to see it here. Breaking into the third dimension, we have Kirby and the Forgotten Land, which only just managed to make this list because it came out it came out nearly a year ago. This is easily a personal favorite of mine. I absolutely adore this game. It takes everything that makes a Kirby game Kirby, puts it in 3D, and yet it still manages to... It feels like a Kirby game, but it also feels so new at the same time, and that is a really hard thing to do. It's one of the few, arguably, sort of big games over the past year that I can say with confidence I've absolutely 100% completed, and I love it to anywhere you ask me to and back. There is so much to do in this game. It is so accessible and approachable as well, but at the same time, like every good Kirby game, towards the end, it becomes nightmarishly difficult. Well, maybe not nightmarishly, but it becomes a lot more difficult, and it becomes weirdly dark. I love it. I love this game so much. I don't even want to say too much about it because you should just buy it. You should just buy it, and you will love it, or I will disown you. Next up, we have Fire Emblem Engage, which, this one's, I wouldn't say controversial, but it certainly caused a stir in the Fire Emblem community. Rather than focusing on the, social sim and romance aspects that Three Houses was so famed for, it actually takes things kind of back to its roots, and it's even more about the combat, and I really like the combat. Some of the, over-the-top anime stylings don't entirely gel with me personally, but I can easily look past that and see this game for what it is, which is frankly fantastic. The combat is as good as it's ever been, maybe even slightly better with the Emblem ring system. It just allows for so much more sort of flexibility and fun, and it just feels like personalization, but realistically, it's not that personalizable. But the fact that it makes you feel like it's personalizable is a fantastic feat. Performance is great. It's another RPG to add to the ever-growing list of fantastic RPGs on Switch. If you like Fire Emblem, and Fire Emblem Three Houses was maybe a bit too dating simmy for you, then this is going to be everything you ever dreamed of. Dashing its way into view, we have Neon White, which was a game that was revealed, and everyone, well, at least everyone I spoke to sort of went, huh? But it is the king of arcadey releases this year. It takes modern ideas and sort of distills it down into a very sort of satisfying, almost Mirror's Edge kind of thing, but it also goes just so many steps further. If you find joy in replaying the same thing over and over again and finding new ways to kind of trim little bits of time off and, get around things faster, what some people may even call speed running, then this game is going to absolutely scratch that itch for you. And it doesn't even necessarily assume that you're going to work everything out for yourself, which, I don't know, you could argue that maybe it's more fun to find things for yourself, but the game will actually show you, hey, shortcuts, baby. And so if you like the idea of speedrunning, but you've never really felt like you've got the patience to get into it, I think this is a fantastic way to do that. So yeah, Neon White, get it. Disappearing from one location and reappearing on this list, it is Portal Companion Collection. Now, could you argue that this is two games and it should be two games? I don't care. This is one of the best and most deliciously dense and well-refined first-person puzzle games ever made, and its exceptional sequel as well. And I genuinely don't know which one I prefer. I struggle with this all the time. Portal is like a classic. It is this beautifully distilled experience. But Portal 2 is more cinematic, it has more going on. I don't know. But either way, I'm not going to go on about it. Just get this. I mean, frankly, you should know about Portal, and if you don't, I envy you. Just download the game, play it now, and frankly, thank me. Next up, it's gonna surprise you all. It's another RPG, Xenoblade Chronicles 3. My god, fans have been eating well this year. I was initially a little bit wary of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, or at least me diving into it, because I never finished Xenoblade Chronicles 2. It didn't gel with me as much as the original and X did, but I should have left those feelings at the door. This is... Honestly, this might be the best of the bunch. I frankly don't understand how you can have 6 main characters and have them all feel essentially, largely equally weighted. I mean, let's not deny it. Noah's gonna be the main character throughout all this, but at the same time, they really do a fantastic job in giving equal weight to every single one of the major protagonists, and it's a delight. The combat in Xenoblade has always been a bit of a sort of a difficult area for some people, but this game introduces it. It's almost too slowly at times, I think, but it does it so that it doesn't overwhelm the player with loads of different mechanics and different things that they can do, so that you can enjoy the game properly and fully. And frankly, it's an absolute dream come true. They keep adding more with the DLC, but frankly, the base game is more than worth the price of entry alone. If you've ever had even a passing interest, I can't recommend it enough. I really can't. Next up, we have the Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe. Now, this is a weird entry, but I will stand by it. This is, well, not the original Stanley Parable, but the original Stanley Parable souped up with a load of new stuff thrown in, and whilst I was a little bit worried that it would maybe be either too much new stuff or not enough new stuff and not make it worth the price of entry. They struck that balance just absolutely perfectly. Just absolutely perfectly. It's the kind of game that I can't talk too much about because you really just need to go in and experience it, and this is the best way to do it, I feel. I genuinely feel that this is better than the original. And the original. And incidentally takes the top spot for my most favorite review that I've ever written. I sincerely encourage you to check it out because I had so much fun. And lastly, sweet baby rays, it's Metroid Prime Remastered. I genuinely believe that some game developers are ruining this game because it absolutely raises the bar for remasters and remakes so unbelievably high. You take one of the best games ever made that was frankly a miracle that it even worked because it was taking a 2D game, making it 3D, and also changing the perspective, and then you change and update every single art asset to make it look like a modern game. You run it at 60 frames a second, you add God knows how many control options, including gyro, and what you're left with is an absolute dream. It is just an absolute dream, and if I had to pick one game from this, 6th year of the Switch that is my personal favorite, this is definitely for consideration, and the more that I think about it, the more I think, yeah, it's up there. And yeah, it's a remaster. I don't care. It's one of the best games ever made. It's available on Switch. It's just And there you have it. I honestly can't believe this is the 6th one of these videos that I've done. Honestly, it just feels like a whirlwind. I can't believe the Switch is 6. I can't believe I'm probably going to be doing a couple more of these. At least, it certainly feels that way. But frankly, it's been a blast. What are your favorite games from the last year? Did we miss something out that you were absolutely gaga for? Let us know with a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, then why don't you click that subscribe button, create 5 alternate accounts, and then click it 5 more times, 1 on each, so we're subscribers. And be sure to check out NintendoLife.com for all sorts of lovely Nintendo-related content. Thank you again for watching. Bye-bye.